Hello, Tom. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Today's guest is the fantastic illustrator and graphic designer, Tom Velez. And when I was younger and I dreamed about doing creative work, I dreamed of doing the illustrations and design that Tom is doing. Seriously, his work is that dynamic. And with clients like The Walking Dead, AMC, Us Weekly, Men's Journal, and many other recognizable clients, I promise you need to see his work. Congratulations on having a killer portfolio, Tom. And before we start, where can people see your work?
Wow. Sorry, it's hard to answer that question after that intro. Very nice of you. You could find my work at my website, which is tomvelez.com, and it has links to my Instagram and other portfolio sites. You could also find me on ArtStation, Behance, but mostly all of my stuff goes to Instagram, which is at the Tom Velez, and there's a story behind that name, if you want to get into that later.
Great. And listeners, connect with Tom, and I appreciate if you hit the subscribe and like button for our show. So, Tom, I stopped by your website, and the About Me page is where I typically do my research about the people that are in my show. But yours particularly just had like 2 sentences. You're an illustrator, graphic designer from New York City and who currently resides in Austin, Texas. So I'm curious about your upbringing. Can you tell us about your journey and how you found your way to having a creative career?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I keep it to 2 sentences to make it a little mysterious, but I actually kind of fell into illustration and graphic design. I don't have a degree of any sort. I did go to art school for 2 years, but I graduated from Villanova University with a business degree, and I went to the workforce after that. I worked in entertainment as a market research analyst, and I hated it. It was just like I was like an accountant for ratings, pretty much is the best way to describe it. And I knew I hated doing it. I was always drawing ever since I was younger. And I don't know how the thought came across, but I was like, I think I'm going to give a shot at art school. I would work during the day and then go to FIT in New York City at night. And then so I'd get home around 12 at night because I lived in the furthest part of Queens as you can possibly be in before it turned into Nassau, Long Island. And then I'd do my homework till 2 a.m. I did that for about 2 years until I was right about to get my degree or my associates. And then they told me I needed an extra class, and that class wasn't coming around for another 2 years in the curriculum. So I just dropped out. And from then I shortly left my job. Didn't really have anything lined up. Really fell ass backwards into it. I would just take any job I could. I was working for a modeling agency, doing their graphic design stuff, not photo retouching or anything, but building their website and doing artwork for that and anything I can get. And I ended up at some lawyer firm, do design work for them. And they had a surprising amount of work that they needed. And then I was still shopping my stuff around, and somehow my stuff ended up on the desk at Rolling Stone, and I got a job there and ended up working there for freelance for about 3 years. And yeah, that was the big one.
Let me understand this, Tom, because you kind of blew me away with something you said there.
Yeah.
Because your work is so polished. The illustrations are so magnificent. And I'm not trying to exaggerate here.
Thank you.
They're so good that I'm surprised going to school in high school and middle school, no art teacher pulled you aside and said, Tom, you need to really consider having this be something you do in the future. I mean, because I'm trying to think here through, I'm looking when you graduated. If I'm not mistaken, you've been a professional for 11 years. And just how we live today with technology, it's not a secret that you can have a very successful career as a creative, but that never crossed your mind, which kind of shocks me.
Yeah. Well, I did have one art teacher. It was in we're going way back to when I was in middle school. I always took the art classes. And then at my last year, I guess it was 8th grade before you go into high school, you had to get signed off by all your teachers. And the reason I had to get signed off because I wasn't going to the next high school. I was going to a Catholic school my parents got me into. And when I went to the art teacher, she's like, what is this? And I explained, parents are putting me in Catholic school. And she's like, you're not going to specialized art school or something like that? I was like, no. that never even crossed my mind. And like I could see she was visibly upset with me for it. And then I never forgot that. Yeah, for a long time, art was something that wasn't a part of or I didn't let people know was a part of my life. Like I always drew, but I wouldn't show anybody. People that knew me for a while, one day I would show them a drawing. And they're like, okay, like you traced this or you stole this from somebody or something like that. And yeah, it was just something I always did. And when I was in high school, I was like very into baseball. I got scholarship offers and everything, but then I got an academic scholarship for Villanova, and that's how I ended up there. I had a great time, loved going to that school, and got my business degree. Very valuable degree. I mean, I know that with all the student loans that I paid off, but yeah, after coming out of it, like you're pushed out into the real world, and you get a real taste for it. And then I realized it didn't sit right in my mouth, so I always did drawing. Like before I even decided I was going to go to art school or anything like that, I had bought a tablet for my computer. I always wanted to know how like a sketch from paper got into like that polished work that you would see in comics or in cartoons. And I remember, I mean, I'm really dating myself because you can find a tutorial anywhere now, but I found this one tutorial from an artist I thought I was like really admired, Scotty Young. He's a comic artist, and he just did like a walkthrough of how you do your inks and everything. And he was like one of the first guys that was mostly digital throughout his entire process, where that was very hard to find back then. And once I saw that, I was hooked. That's how I learned how to do Photoshop. I fully knew how to do Photoshop before I enrolled into art school. So I just like kind of blew through those classes. And yeah, I guess that's a long way to answer your question. Yeah, the one teacher that did grab me, and I would take art classes at Villanova too. You get like electives and stuff. So yeah, there was only one of them, and I took my senior year. I would just spend a lot of time on those assignments, and I did very well. And yeah, so I mean, I stood out. When you're going to a business school and you can draw, you stand out. So yeah, I don't know.
No, that makes sense. But let me get to this question. In the introduction of the show, I said when I was a child, I dreamed about doing the work you're doing. In particular,
which is the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, by the way. Thank you so much.
It's true, right? Because like when you're growing up, I'm referring to your illustration work, just the art you did on like the Marvel, the Mandalorian, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't know if these were personal work or client work. It doesn't matter. They're just that great. And this is the stuff that kids dream of. So my question is, Tom, there are so many great illustrators, but how did you separate yourself from the pack? How are you able to do illustrations for so many of the coolest clients?
What I would do is I would draw things that I like the Mandalorian. I mean, there's a lot of Spider-Man stuff. Because I come from Queens, I really identify with him. I would draw what I wanted and put it out there. And that's how eventually people find it. I mean, just how you found me, you said you found me on Instagram. I would put in the early days, I wasn't early enough for like conceptart.org, but I did all like the DeviantArt stuff, which kind of has a bad name these days, but yeah, I just put things out there and they would get seen. For example, you mentioned I did work for The Walking Dead, and I got noticed by them because I did a 5-poster series of Breaking Bad. And they happened to put like a fan art book at the end of the series and gave it out to everybody on the crew. But they only saw my stuff after it was already published. So they called me in, they said they liked my work, and they had this project where I would do a poster for each episode of The Walking Dead for, I think it was season 5. So I would have to go and take the train to the office in Manhattan, watch the episode before it aired, and then I would have a week to do a full poster. Now that project didn't last more than 2 or 3 episodes because they're like, these are the best ratings we ever had. We don't really even need to promote this show, but it was a very cool project. And that's just like one of those examples where I just put stuff out there.
Oh, man, that's a crazy story, man. Oh, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. I'm just thinking,
No.
Imagine you're a fan of the show, so you did some fan art that they just threw together And after it was published in some book, they saw it and they were like, from fan art, you're now doing work for the Walking Dead.
Yeah.
It's completely insane. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, my work didn't end up in the book because they saw it after it was published. So they made sure to like tell me, like, I'm sorry. I was like, well, it's not really published to the public. It was like a crew only gift that they did. But
okay.
Yeah, it was still really cool. And just like getting to go to those offices and meet the people behind some of my favorite shows at that time was insane. I believe in the whole thing. You just kind of put it out there and hopefully good things will happen. You just keep working on stuff and yeah.
Absolutely.
There's no real science to it.
I believe in that as well. Maybe you can speak to us for young artists out there. How does a life of a full-time illustrator look like? For instance, how much time do you do promoting your work? How much time does it take for you to find clients? And obviously a portion of the day is actually illustrating and designing. What does a typical week look like for you?
Someone I heard one time compare it to just having homework all the time. Just after you leave school, I hope you enjoy homework because you're going to be doing it for the rest of your life. I mean, majority of my time is working on my illustrations. And even at this point, I'm learning new programs like Blender and ZBrush, not to be a pro at them, but just to have an understanding of the programming and use it to my advantage. For example, like I'll use Blender for helping me create a scene with perspective, and that because I never was taught illustration. Everything I've learned on like YouTube, or I bought tutorials and that kind of thing. And I never really got to perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very tricky. My mind just can't figure it out. I mean, eventually I get there, but it takes a really long time. So if I'm trying to get to an end result, I'll just like put some blocks together and then set up the camera. But I'm branching off from your question. But so a lot of my time is spent on my illustrations and learning new stuff. Like you said, yes, there is a lot of time that goes into reading contracts or reading NDAs and putting contracts together, invoicing. And that's where I'm glad I had that business school training, because I feel if I didn't have that, I didn't have the thinking behind that and the organizational skills for the whole business end, I probably couldn't do this as a living. It would just eat me alive.
Wow.
Yeah. I feel like that's a big part when I was in art school, and I'm doing quotations with my fingers right now because I didn't spend much time there. I didn't see that covered once, not even like a basic math class or Excel class for you to figure out how to price or invoice or negotiate, because those are some of the biggest parts that gets you some of those cool jobs. Like you need to know how to do that. Otherwise, like you'll leave money on the table or you'll just talk yourself like out of a good job. So yeah, the business end takes a lot of it. And then there's the promoting, which I don't think is that hard personally, because I'm doing the work anyway. So I feel like it's kind of easy just getting it on Instagram, finding the right hashtags, getting it up on your website, your Behance, your ArtStation, the 5 other ones I can't remember right now that you have to put it on to be relevant. My day, personally, I wake up, I walk my dog, and I just get the work emails and everything out of the way, and anything else that needs to be done that I don't want to do, that gets done first, so I have to do it. And then the fun part of my day, the part that it's work, but I really enjoy it, is the illustration. And I'll just do that up until like 6:30. My wife comes home, we have dinner, we hang out, and then she goes to bed. She goes to bed early because she's a nurse. She wakes up at a god awful time, and then I'll just work pretty late into the night until either I get too tired or she's like, come to bed. But that's my schedule. I know that doesn't work for a lot of people, but that's how I've been doing it for years now.
No, that's great, because there's some young artists out there that hears that answer and they're like, wow, that's really interesting. That's something that I'd like to do one day. and the flexibility you have of coming in and out of your creative work. But let me ask you, do you do any personal commissions or do you strictly work with corporations and businesses? And by the way, as I ask this, I've also seen in your website that you have prints for fans to purchase and you have a Patreon page. But can you talk a little bit about, commission work?
Most of my work is businesses and corporations, but I do commissions. I've done almost everything. I've done the Comic-Con circuit for quite a while. I mean, we didn't have anything the last year, but I just found out I'll be at New York Comic-Con this year for the first time. And I'll also be at Florida SuperCon, which is in Miami, which I'm very excited about. And I mean, that's a big part of it is doing private commissions there. And like I said, I've done everything. People have asked me to draw their dogs. I've done that. I've done paintings of people's families, very in-depth personal pieces where they're like, I just want to fill this up with Easter eggs of me and my wife's relationship, like as an anniversary. I've done pretty much everything, but those projects are a lot of fun. And then every now and then, especially with the work I've done in the past, a lot of people ask me for superhero stuff, which is always fun to do. The majority of my stuff is either illustration or graphic design work for larger corporations.
And what about your Patreon page? Yeah, I don't know much about Patreon and how that works.
Yeah, so thank you for asking because I forgot to mention in the beginning. And the second I finished saying where everyone could find me, I remembered. But yeah, so I started a Patreon. I had it a few years ago and I would just kind of throw things there. It was kind of scattered and then I left it alone for a few years and I've been doing it again a lot more. It's more focused. It's focused and yet not, because I find it to be a place where I can put up sketches that I don't post on Instagram or no one sees other than Patreon. And the main thing is I'll put up tutorials. I'll do walkthroughs, process walkthroughs. I'll throw tips up. I recently did a video tour of a sketchbook I just finished. And most recently, I posted one of the images to Instagram, but I've been working on my own kind of IP where I wrote a story and I'm working on characters and just keyframes. So one of them's called Harambo, which is...
Is that with the gorilla?
Yeah.
Jeez, man, that is so awesome. I was even asking myself, who is this for? I didn't want to bog down too many questions about your personal work, but I'm looking at this. It's amazing. I'm looking at the bullets wrapped around his body. He's shooting a gun. The other, he's holding a knife. And even the way you created the poster has the poster, when you fold a poster, you got those lines.
Yeah.
And listeners, this won't make sense until you go to his Behance page and look at it. It's just amazing. But in your Patreon, you're creating a storyline with, what do you call it? Hambone?
Harambo. So Harambe and Rambo combined. That's pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's basically those two stories. It's a hybrid of those two stories, and it's completely ridiculous. It's I'm working on two projects. That's one of them, and the other one's called 1, 2, 3 Kill. And that 1, 2, 3 Kill is very serious, where Harambo is completely ridiculous and a lot of fun to work on. So they kind of even each other out. Where if I'm too bogged down with this more serious tone of the other story, I can always jump back to Harambo. And that was something that was a joke in a group chat with me and my friends. And then I ended up dressing up as that for Halloween one year. No one knew what it meant until they asked me why are you a army gorilla? But yeah, it's something I actually wrote an outline for, developed characters for, and now within the last year with COVID and everything, and I had one project that made me not really want to work on existing properties unless I was being commissioned to do that. I wanted to work on something that was my own. So that was one of the ideas. And I've been working on that and 1, 2, 3 Kill. And those two properties, I put those on my Patreon first. They'll eventually go to Instagram because I want the most people to see it. And I don't have the largest Patreon audience right now. Hopefully it'll grow. But the idea is that people can see the initial sketches, process through those paintings, and how do I get to a finished image. So the Patreon itself is more of like a long form tutorial while you kind of watch my art journey. That doesn't sound too pretentious.
That sounds exciting. And even in my head, I'm thinking these two IP projects, I'm sure a dream of yours to do one day, maybe, I don't know, an animated series or online comic book. There's a lot of things there I can see somebody definitely wanting to go be part of. But I want to ask you this question, because you've done so many fantastic things in your career. What particular projects are you most proud of and why?
I knew you were going to ask this question, and I was supposed to think of an answer. I want to say I don't really have, okay, it's not specific projects, but there was one time in my career I really wanted to work for a specific video game company, and I really, really went after them. I did tests, I got an interview, and it didn't work. And then years later, I'm at C2E2 in Chicago, the Comic-Con there, and one of the people that is very high up in their organization came by my table and started talking to me and was like, this work is awesome, which is all I really needed to hear, because it was almost like a month of work that I could never show anybody. And at the end of the day, it was kind of, at the time, it was like kind of a dream crush for me. And then for that, years later, one of the people higher up to see it, and I have like an existing relationship with that person now. It's just really that was cool. It kind of justified that I don't suck, because the other thing is, like I said, I don't have a formal training in art, so I don't have like a lot of peers that I can lean on. I barely know anybody that does artwork, like outside of my friends from like conventions and stuff, like some of those comic artists who are just amazing. I really don't have anybody else that I can like throw things off of. Like all my friends are pretty much like lawyers and accountants now because I went to business school. But that was like a big one for me. That was like where it kind of justified kind of the work that I've done in the years. And then after that, I've done some work within the last year on some amazing video games that I cannot wait. I don't know if I'll have the time to play them, but I'm just going to buy them just to have them. And yeah, I look forward to that, because I always wanted to work in video games. I always wanted to work in film. I mean, I kind of worked in TV with the Walking Dead stuff and the other AMC stuff, but that wasn't like for the shows. That was almost collateral for the shows. Yeah, those will be the next milestones. So it's not really just like one project. It's like moments within, I guess, the career. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, makes a lot of sense. And I want to ask this question, and I want to preface by saying you're the first one I'm going to ask this of. Okay. I want to be sensitive here how I ask this. I have had people who listen to the show ask me about how much money artists that is on my show make. That's always a topic of discussion because of the stigma of a starving artist perception. Obviously, that is a very personal question. I would never in a million years ask anybody directly.
Oh, it's $1 million. I make $1 million a year.
But what I'm really hoping that you can do here, and I'm going to have to ask this of everybody in the future, how to sort of just answer this question is, what can you expect to make as a freelance illustrator early in your career to what maybe an accomplished one can make in the future? Maybe you can answer it or as an industry, maybe some ballpark numbers. Because like I said, people really, the whole starving artist thing, people always ask me, well, you just interviewed a director of animation. Can you at least give us a ballpark of what that career looks like monetarily? So maybe you can just sort of give an idea of freelancer and a career, what that looks like. So
in the beginning of my career, like I said, business is not a big part of, I would say, our curriculum. So you kind of like find out what the prices are based on what things you look up and whatnot. Only did I really find out what things, like what you should be invoicing people, when I got the Graphic Artists Guild's price and the standards. I mean, that's a butchering of the name. And that really opened my eyes to like what you can really be charging. I think when you first start out, I didn't exactly go this route. I got lucky and ended up at Rolling Stone and then again in New York Magazine later. I think you should try to get an in-house job and then do freelance. I don't think anybody should do freelance right out of school. Like, you should take some freelance jobs. I don't think going solely freelance. And when I say freelance, I don't mean like I worked freelance at Rolling Stone for 3 years, but I was there almost every day for 3 years. Like, that was my job. When I say freelance, I mean like you don't know what the next job's going to be. Your job is finding jobs and doing those jobs. Like, that's what I consider freelance. And in the beginning of my career, before I knew like what you should be charging, was not good. I was not doing well, but I was having a great time. I really was. I mean, I don't have the responsibilities I do now. So money that I earned, I could spend it however I want. But yeah, it's rough in the beginning. You're not going to be as, things are always going to be a little harder than you initially think they're going to be. And even if you think they're going to be hard, they're still going to be even harder than that. I would say that's the best mindset to have for freelancing. I'm not going to give a monetary amount because it's embarrassing, but I did not make a lot of money. I would definitely say I was under the poverty line at first. Then when I started to figure things out and I started to incorporate like my business mindset, like the training that I got from getting a business degree from one of the top business schools and using that and doing a lot of research on my own and figuring out what you're supposed to price, and also working on I think a big thing is working on your craft, because it's one thing to ask for those prices. It's another thing to get them because your work speaks for you. It doesn't matter like how low you can even price very low, but if your work's not good enough, no one's going to want to hire you. So I would say now I live comfortably. You know, I own a home, which is big for me. So yeah,
No, these.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I'm just going to say, no, these are great advice that you're giving us here as well. So I didn't want to cut you off, but you can keep on going, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm kind of like beating around the bush on your question just because I don't want to like throw my financials out there, but
absolutely.
It does take a few years. What I would want to say to anybody coming like right out of school, definitely try to get like an in-house job. This, not just because it's a little more secure, but that you learn from people that have been doing it for years. You learn the shortcuts, you learn how things get done. And for example, with illustration, especially like concept art or marketing material art, like that kind of stuff. For years, I saw online people saying not to draw from reference, which is insane. Or like a lot of people were like, don't use 3D assets for anything, which the stuff that I post online, I paint everything, but I create like reference for myself to use. And now things have to move so fast and turnaround times are so fast. If you've ever follow any of like the pros for let's say the MCU, like Andy Park or Charlie Wen, if you could find like them do a tutorial or just like a walkthrough, they're pulling things from everywhere. They're just trying to get, all that matters to a client is the end image. They're not going to care that
absolutely.
They're not going to care that your artistic integrity was swayed because you used a 3D model on something. I mean, I don't even use one that much at all. Like I told you, I just started learning Blender. That was because I didn't want to sit there and draw 100 lines on paper or on Photoshop to figure out a perspective where I can create the scene and move the camera around, get the exact shot that's in my head. Like that itself saved hours of time for me. And you see these little art wars on Twitter and Instagram, like you shouldn't do certain things. And I don't know how I got on this tangent, but
I want to add on to that, actually. I'm going to say this because I talk to students and because they have questions about what it's like being a professional creative. And I tell them, because I remember when I was growing up, I would have people pat me in the back when I was a kid, like, did you copy this off something? I'm like, no, it came from my mind. So they would celebrate the fact that you could do things conceptually without looking at a reference. So you were celebrated for it. But when you get older, there are some things that you have to acquire, meaning you have to reference, you have to learn, and you can't always just that whole past thinking of as a child, like, oh, you didn't look at something to draw this. When you get older, it's the end result. Exactly what you said, Tom, is what the client cares. They don't care the process of getting there. If you had to reference a bunch of pictures, if you didn't, if you had to go into the forest and think about it, they don't care. They just want the end result to be killer work. And I know we've kind of went a different way from the answer, and you gave some great advice that you're answering the next question, which is what advice you give for young illustrators and artists in their careers. I'd rather not even ask you that because we're answering it now.
No, that's fine. Let's go for it.
Let me ask you this question. Is there anything in your past experience that helped shape you to become the successful creative that you are today?
Yeah, I think growing up, me and my brothers were always taught to, like, if you're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability. So I've always used that kind of mindset for anything I do. Like we've talked about all the way from my middle school art class to now. And I want to say I always felt that way. Like whenever I played sports, when I was playing baseball, like I didn't make the freshman team. I ended up being like the varsity captain because I would just have that mentality. I got scholarships for baseball, but I ended up getting an academic scholarship for a very good school because if you're going to be at school, you got to you got to put everything you can to get the good grades. And then I always brought that into drawing, even to like this day, especially if I'm working on something that I want to get like close to photorealistic. I'm always looking and I'm like, well, how can this be better? Like, I know I can do better than it is right now. Like, I never feel like I'm finished with a project. I just am done. Like, I can't push it any further. And that's why, like, I hear a lot of artists say they cringe, and I do too as well when you look back on some old work. I mean, if you're not, I feel like you're not growing. But at the same time, I know I can look back on that stuff and like at that time that I put everything I could into that. And I feel like with that mentality, the work is only going to get better. The speed is only going to get faster. And I think that's the best way to go about things because you don't want to be stagnant. You don't want to be called out on being like putting out something that's half-ass. So if you're going to do it, just do it as best as you can and be honest with yourself with it too. Don't make excuses.
Great answer.
Thank you.
I really had maybe a couple more questions here, but I didn't want to forget about this because we were talking about The Walking Dead. When you said that you were drawing these illustrations for The Walking Dead, were they sending you the episodes prior to the release and on TV? And if they were, how confidential did you have to be? I mean, obviously you had to be quiet. You couldn't tell anybody, right? So that was the big thing. Was
right.
Am I correct there? Did you were able to see the episodes prior to everybody else?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was very big. Like that's when The Walking Dead was like white hot. Like,
wow.
Everybody. So I had to sign, I think it might have been the craziest NDA that I've signed to date, where it's just like, they will financially destroy me.
Wow. No, I know the actors didn't even know sometimes the plot, so I knew how secretive it was, but wow.
Yeah. And then, so the big one was the first episode, and they had me come into the offices and watch. They wouldn't even send me the episode. So
that makes sense. I didn't think of that. I was thinking about maybe you're in a dark room in your house and looking over your shoulder, making sure no one's watching, but you were not even, they couldn't even send it to you. You had to go there.
Yeah. So I had to go there, and then I would get the art director's laptop, and she was like, look, just watch it. Don't touch my laptop. It's got my name all over it. So if it gets out, I'll know who did it. And I'm like, I'm not going to email it around. I'm just excited to be here. And yeah, so I'd sit there and watch the episode, and they'd come in and they're like, what'd you think? I was like, it was amazing. And they're like, okay, so we need to have a full painting by the air date. And I was there a week before it aired, the premiere episode.
It's crazy.
So then I would have to like get home as fast as I can and just start like making thumbnails of things that I saw from the episode. I also couldn't take like screenshots or anything. So all the reference of the characters I had to,
We're all memory.
well, memory, but also like I could pull up photos of the actors and stuff, but then have to kind of, I mean, the first episode had a very specific scene and had to recreate that. It was kind of wild. Yeah,
That is wild.
That was a wild one.
I have one final question for you, but before I ask this, which I ask everybody, I would fail a lot of listeners who listen to this because you have a business degree. But I guess for artists in general, illustrators, how do they shortcut the business side of dealing with clients, contract, negotiating for your art? Where do you reference this stuff? Where do you get that information since you have a background in a business degree? Like, where should they get that information?
So I found mine by chance. When I say that, I mean like the contract. Like I have my own contract that I give out to clients. And the other thing, if I could say this, never do work without a contract first. I've made that mistake several times, even when I've had a contract made up, like a template. And I was like, oh no, this person will be no problem. There's too much on the line for them not to. Just do a contract for everybody. It doesn't matter. If it's your mom, get a contract. Because not only does it set like the rules of the game for them, but it also protects you and it protects them as well. So like it makes rules for both parties. And when things fall through, and they inevitably will, with some clients, you can always go back like, look, we have this and that. You said you were going to honor these promises, and I said I was going to honor those promises. So it's always good to have a contract. Where I found mine, there was a artist I follow. I'll plug him because I don't know if he still has these templates up, but maybe I'll put them on my website or something for people to download. But there was a template contract and a template proposal. And they were very vague, but they're vague for a reason, so you can customize into your own kind of likings. I would say those are two of the most important things, to have a proposal, because that it's very quick. It says what the job is. It says what's going to cost. It says the timeline of the project. Once they agree to that, then you send the contract. That really just hits all the fine points and make sure you get paid at the end of the day. I feel like that kind of stuff is skipped over. Well, then again, I mean, like I said, I dropped out of art school, but
I didn't get that in my art school either. Like I didn't get anything about the business side of it. No.
Right. And I feel like you're coming out of school. It's a business. You need to make money. I mean, I think the whole starving artist thing, I hate even hearing that, because at the end of the day, every single thing that we come in contact with is either designed and drawn up at one point. So how is there starving artists? It doesn't make any sense. It should be like everyone should be getting paid. Because I'm like looking around my office right now, even down to the scissors. Someone designed that. Someone drew up the blueprints for that. How is this whole starving artist thing? And it's because I feel like it's skipped over, and it's like, oh, don't worry about it. You'll get paid, but you're dealing with business people when you get out of school. That's why they're coming to you, because they're not their creatives. They have a project in mind. They want to hire somebody, but at the end of the day, they have a budget. They have deadlines they need to make. And so you should know about those as well. So, I never plugged the artist that posted his name was Ash Thorpe, or is Ash Thorpe. He's a designer for like a bunch of movies and stuff, and he does these amazing car renders that are all done in 3D, but I swear they look real. Like I just want to jump in one of them and drive around. But yeah, there was a while back that he posted a contract and a proposal template. Now, once I got that, my best friend is a lawyer, so I wrote one up and then I had him go over it, and he really looked it over and made sure it was kind of bulletproof. But I mean, you can do that as an illustrator or a designer. Just hire a lawyer to look over a contract. They'll bill you for whatever that is. And at the end of the day, and this is the business part of me coming out, that's a business expense and that's a tax write-off. So, I mean, you're not losing all that money. It's helping you at the end of the year when it comes down to all that tax stuff, which is also a lot of fun to deal with when you're a freelancer.
No, these are all great advice, Tom. And here's your final question. How do you personally define success?
It's a great question. It really is. A few years ago, I would have thought it's a certain project that I would have got, but I've had those projects and they're great when they come, but they're fleeting. I mean, they're gone as soon as they come through. So I don't think you should define yourself on success based on like getting that one big job or getting that or hitting a certain amount of money on a commission or for the end of the year. For me, at this point in my life, I think one, having people around me that I love is one of the big ones for me. But then in terms of like career, just I think success is continually being passionate about the work that you're doing. It doesn't have to be just based on one project, just continually loving it, because you always hear these stories of people that burned out or just have no love for a certain industry anymore. And I mean, I feel like they may be very successful, like you may know who they are, but they don't want to draw anymore. So like how successful is that for them personally if they hate what they're doing? So have people that you love and love what you're doing. I think you're pretty successful.
Fantastic, Tom. And thank you for sharing us your awesome creative journey. And lastly, where can people connect with you again?
Yeah. So my website, which is tomvelez.com. And then there are links there to my Instagram, but you can also find me on Behance. Just search Tom Velez and ArtStation, and I have a Patreon, which I believe is patreon.com/Tom Velez. And I think that is everything.
Listeners, make sure you connect with him. And thank you. Till next time, everyone, take care and bye.
Thanks so much.